Hey, welcome back to the Pat Riot Show. I'm your host, Micheal Bear Clair, and today we are here with Dr. Frank Galbraith, and we're going to be talking about some amazing stuff that you may not be aware of. So I'm just going to kick this off. If you're not familiar with Dr. Frank, you can go back and look at video 1 that we did, which kind of details a bit about his life and how he became who he is. And what we're going to talk about today are the Anunnaki, or the... how do you pronounce it, Doctor?
You can say Anunnaki.
Oh, okay. I want to make sure I'm saying it right. Well, who are the Anunnaki?
All right, the Anunnaki, another term for it is Nibirians. The planet Nibiru is 117 trillion nautical miles, way beyond Pluto, going out of the in our universe. It's a planet that orbits around doesn't orbit around our sun. It orbits around its own sun, but it passes through our solar system every 3,007 years. And so they knew about our Earth. They had a problem. They had been at war with someone else, an intergalactic war. And they've been lopping nuclear weapons at each other, obviously, for quite some time. Supposedly about 400,000 Earth years. Now, their year is a little different than ours. Their individual year is about 3007 of ours. They call it a shar, S-H-A-R. That's simply the length of the time of their circuit going around their sun. They age a little differently than ours. So it takes for them to age 1 year in terms like we age a year going around our sun in 365 days. It takes them 3007 of our years to age a year. Anyway, they age differently. And they have been at war. And they've been destroying their atmosphere. But their science is very sophisticated. And they could patch holes in their atmosphere by weaving a fabric. That's the translation in their writing. Out of powdered gold. They took gold metal and reconstitute it by converting it to what we call white powdered form, and made a fabric out of it, and they patched their atmosphere. Well, they need a little more than they had or knew they were going to need, so they searched the universe for planets that were watery, blue watery planets, because they knew blue watery planets, the waters, contained gold. And it would be easy, like you might simplify and say, go siphon it. Well, not quite. But they knew that there would be gold in those waters. And the most convenient one to them happened to be Earth. Well, they came by Earth every 3,007 years. Their planet did. So they sent off an expedition of 60 of their astronauts, and they flew on into our solar system, and they entered it by near Pluto and on through, and they came right through the asteroid belt because they had ascertained there's a hole in the asteroid belt. Well, we didn't know that, and we instead were losing satellites that we were sending off into space by running into big chunks of rocks in the asteroid belt. Well, we fly through it nowadays. They also told us a few other things. Well, we didn't discover the planet Pluto until 1930. They flew by it 400,000 years ago, and to get to Earth. Well, they got to Earth, and but that's who the Anunnaki is. And they landed in the Persian Gulf, and they sighted their landing spot by noticing the twin towers of Mount Ararat always has snow on top. And we, the peoples of that time period, called them the Anunnaki, which simply means from the heavens to earth they came. Out of the clouds they came down to earth. And that's where they got their name. So that's why they're called the Anunnaki. Now,
I wanted to have you talk a little bit about, because there's a lot of confusion I know of people that I know about the Nephilim and how they tie together.
The Nephilim is a term that you will find in the Bible foremost. It is confused with fallen angels. The Nephilim are not Anunnaki. Okay?
Okay.
They are fallen angels. And they come in all sizes. But they are not Anunnakis. Okay.
All right.
They are not Anunnaki. There's another group called the Igigis and some other groups, but they're often interchanged mistakenly with the Anunnaki. Read your Bible and you'll find out they are not Anunnaki. And not all Nephilim are bad. They're not all evil. They simply be ranked with good and bad. And because the clay tablets that exist all over the Middle East refer to them, and because they are recorded for some reason, it's been concluded that they came from the same place. Well, they didn't. The Nephilim didn't come down in spaceships, in fiery chariots, because they're spaceships. The ones that they came down to Earth in, the big spaceships, yes, they did. But their little spaceships that flew around had fire, exhaust. And those are usually 2- and 3-person spaceships. Their big ships, well, they did too. But apparently mankind decided to associate them with the angels. Now, the Nephilim are fallen angels.
Wow. It's a pretty amazing story when you hear how Sumeria was basically so far advanced over just about anything we've ever seen. Is it did it predate Atlantis, or did it or Lemuria or any of those?
Oh no, Atlantis had to come after this.
Okay.
Because Atlantis was a civilization that had to have formed after all of this was happening. This was very, very early on. Look, this was largely, creation had existed. Mankind existed. And there was mankind all over the earth at this time. Now, Atlantis is believed to be somewhere in the vicinity of what we call the Mediterranean Sea. At that time, we don't know for certain that the Mediterranean Sea really existed. The Nile River came down. In all the early writings there of the Anunnaki, they don't talk about the Mediterranean Sea. Why? The Nile River came down the Nile and all over the place, and it came to the cliffs of North Africa and just poured over like Niagara Falls does. And if you then trace the cliff line all the way out to where the Atlantic Ocean is, you didn't get to the Atlantic Ocean because the continent, the subcontinent of Spain and Morocco were all one. It was a narrow, that that isthmus through there didn't exist. And so when that broke up in a big serious earthquake, but what you had was what they called the Great Rift Valley, full of lakes and communities. And when the Atlantic Ocean began to pour into the Great Rift Valley, it flooded. The same way the Black Sea didn't come through between Greece and Turkey. That was also solid. And there was no land bridge or anything. That broke up, and so you had the isthmus there too. The water from the Black Sea then began to pour into all those island areas, and the Mediterranean Sea came into being. So you had the water from the Black Sea, you had the water that always had been pouring in from the Nile, filling all the little lakes and everything. And when you say, well, that was a lot of water, but it was also the nature of the environment, the summer heat and everything. And then there was no water coming in from the ocean. It all changed. 2 big earthquakes. Now, supposedly Atlantis was possibly a major civilization and so forth out there. Did it sink into the sea, or did the city drown it? Did the sea rise up and drown it? We don't know. But it was quite deep because of the excavations in the center out there, way out in the center. If you draw a line from Tunis over towards Italy, the depth is like 600 feet. Wow. Now, that's not a lot, but it's a lot when you think about if there was a city down there 600 feet, and all of a sudden it filled up with water. But they have this whole idea of it being a city built in concentric circles, and they had a navy. But there's not much about where their navy went. Who did they trade with? Where did they go to? And so forth. That information is all part of Plato's poems. He doesn't define it. He tells the story of the destruction of Atlantis. He doesn't tell about the commerce of Atlantis. That's the interesting thing. And with everything we know today, why can't they find it?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Why can't they find it? Why can't they go down in the Bermuda Triangle and find out why it's so active? The Bermuda Triangle is just like the navel of the Earth, which is the telluritic currents that rise up through the pyramid, and the same thing at Stonehenge. You better not be there at 1201 or 1206 or whatever it is when the currents decide to rise up out of the center of Stonehenge. Because if you're wearing a watch or got any good camera equipment, forget it. It's all destroyed.
Yeah. They knew what they were doing.
Well, I'll tell you, I used to, as a tour guide, I would tell people this. And I was there. The first time I experienced it, I was on top of the pyramid. I was not wearing a watch. But if I had been, my watch would have been ruined. But later on, I began to tell people. But in the official literature about the Great Pyramid, there was no mention of any of this. The only people that were learning anything about it was learning it from me. And they didn't like that.
I bet not.
They principally dwelt along the Tigris-Euphrates, and they took their little jets and they flew over to the west coast of South America and Central America, where they befriended the natives. This is long before the Spaniards and the Portuguese came along and destroyed those people. They brought smallpox and measles along and decimated half the people that way. But they introduced them to the smelting of gold. And that's why that gold was, they came and found this incredible gold. The Spanish, there was no gold like that. They can still go back to the churches in Spain and Portugal and find that gold. It's so different than European gold. They can still find it. Anyway, in South America, and then they went down into Central Africa to the, and they not only there, they had to dig deep. The gold mines were deep.
Yeah, they're like 12,000 feet, right?
Yeah, well, I'm saying they initially were 5,000, and but they went much deeper. And at the time, they ran into diamonds.
Wow.
And the interesting thing is, they didn't find these diamonds to be of any great significance. They had power stones, and that leads us into the idea of MEs. MEs. ME really means it's a power stone or objects of power. And they came in all different colors, but they were manufactured stones. They were not gems. These were manufactured they were manufactured stones, but they were power stones. They were created to do things. And they, in the ascending gallery in the Great Pyramid, as you went up the ascending gallery, there were 26 or 27, I think 26 or 27 niches on either side. And in those niches were these power stones, and they were all different as you went up because they had a particular function. We would call those things Helmholtz resonators, and they converted the gas to sound. And that's how it went up, and then was filtered again going into the king's chamber, where that sound was filtered in a certain way and converted to microwave energy. So it went from sound to microwave energy in the king's chamber. Well, the power stones, the MEs, those were manufactured back in Nibiru. They were not man-made on this earth. And there were lots of them, lots of different places. They played a big role in wireless electricity. They enhanced the operation of wireless electric things. And people over the years found them and thought they were real jewels. But they weren't jewels. But they're, and when they were found later on, particularly in the 18th and 19th century, when they were being found a lot in Egypt, they couldn't believe that the facets in these jewels were so absolutely perfect. They had no idea that they were man-made.
Wow. Well, we've got just a couple minutes here left.
Okay.
Can you talk a little bit about the importance of the Knights Templar?
I know, according to history, a group of French knights came down to Rome and asked to be given the rights of an order by the Pope. And they were granted that, and they became the Knights Templars. And their principal job or role was to give free and protect free passage to Jerusalem. And there were 5 of them initially, and then 9. And they had very strict orders. When I say orders, these were their rules that they behaved by, and they were strict. And the two or three of the leaders, they were French noblemen. Now, there is some question about this. Their order grew very rapidly. They got to Jerusalem, and the then king, he gave them refuge in the palace that really was on top of the old temple. Now, what was there? Buried in the catacombs under the temple was an immense fortune from David and Solomon, and believed to contain the Ark of the Covenant, which they snuck out of there and took to France. Now, in the meantime, before the massacre, they grew to an order of between 6,000 and 6,500 members. And they built unbelievable fortifications using a concept of architecture and construction unknown beforehand on this planet, and since then never replicated thereafter. They built 10 cathedrals in France, 9 of which are in the first province ever defined, and it's called a geomorph. It's a interesting figure, but it's a geometrical figure. And the east and west points, when connected by a line, which is absolutely perfectly east and west, extended west, goes to the same island where the Cathedral of Notre Dame is in Paris, which burned this last year.
Right.
The most famous of the cathedrals is not Notre Dame. It's the Chartres Cathedral at Les Baux, France. People don't know that. Its characteristic is you go into a Catholic cathedral, any place, and you will be overloaded with statues of Mary and David and all the angels and everything like that. Paintings on the walls and so forth. You won't find a single thing like that at Chartres. There is no decoration of that form whatsoever inside that cathedral. On the outside, yes, but not on the inside. The walls, the columns, the ceiling, and everything, absolutely bare. Some Catholics, when they go there, think it's heresy. And they don't. Real devout Catholics walk in and they come out feeling it's heresy. Others feel very differently. The stone is referred to as frozen music. You will read about this in the book.
Yep.
And the emptiness of the cathedral is a different kind of music. The cathedral itself, for all intents and purposes, is a speaker. And in the book, that's exactly what it becomes in the chapter called The Celebration. And it was meant to be that way. It makes its own music out of the emptiness of the church, of the cathedral. They built all these churches, and in the middle of the geomorph, they assembled a production operation. So they were building all of these cathedrals simultaneously. They were manufacturing the components. That's why they all look alike and have all the same features. And furthermore, you will find the same dimensions and the same features mathematically that are incorporated in the Great Pyramid in the Chartres Cathedral.
Amazing.
And the magic numbers of 1.9 and 1.4 as features of the models that you will find in the platforms underneath the pyramids, and the dimensions of the reservoir, and the model relationships of the Ark of the Covenant, and a few other things. And that is no coincidence.
Yeah, there can't be.
No, can't be.
Well, Doc, we got to bring this one to a close. And
Okay.
we'll do another one here shortly. So thanks for joining us on the show. And tune in for the next episode. We're going to do a bunch more with Dr. Frank. This is fascinating information. You have to tune in for it. So we'll see you on the next show. Thanks for watching.